Libra, my dear soul, let me be clear right from the start. You are not to blame for what's coming. And the truth is you never were. I need you to hear this not just with your ears but with the part of you that's been quietly aching for clarity, for peace, for something to finally make sense. Because what you're about to hear in this video, it's not just another horoscope. It's a soul transmission. It's a divine alignment between your energy and a message that was always meant to find you right now. Hello, beautiful Libra. Welcome to Zodiac Whisper Tarot. You didn't land here by accident. You were brought here by something far greater than coincidence. Maybe it was your intuition. Maybe it was divine timing. But what I know for sure is this: the weight you've been carrying, the invisible emotional load of guilt, over-responsibility, self-doubt was never truly yours. And the universe is ready to help you release it. You've always felt the pressure to hold everything together, haven't you? To be the peacemaker, the harmonizer, the one who smiles even when your heart trembles, who says, "It's fine," when you're barely holding on. You've mastered the art of balance for others, but today we're going to talk about balancing for yourself. Because Libra, there is something sacred stirring beneath the surface of your life. A shift. A reset. A spiritual correction. And this change, it isn't something you need to earn, fight for, or apologize for. It's something that's been waiting to arrive the moment you stopped blaming yourself for everything that wasn't your responsibility. And I know part of you still questions whether you're worthy of this shift. Whether letting go of guilt means you're abandoning your duty. But hear me clearly, you were never meant to be the emotional anchor for everyone around you. You were never meant to fix what others broke. You were never meant to shrink your truth so that others could feel comfortable in their confusion. Your presence here tells me you're ready to hear what your soul has been whispering for so long. That the love, peace, clarity, and validation you've been seeking from others has always been waiting inside of you. And once you remember who you truly are, everything in your outer world will begin to rearrange itself around that truth. Let me take a moment to thank you, deeply and sincerely, for being here. Every like, every comment, every time you choose to subscribe to this channel, you're not just supporting Zodiac Whisper Tarot, you're also saying yes to your own growth, your own healing, and your own divine unfolding. Your presence makes this work possible. Now I want to hear from you, Libra. What brought you here today? What did your spirit whisper that led you to click on this message? Take a moment to drop a comment below and write, "I claim my balance," if this is already resonating. Your words may help another Libra recognize that they, too, are not alone in this journey. And believe me, beloved, you'll want to stay with me all the way through this message. Because what the universe is about to reveal to you will change the way you see yourself and your path forever. Are you ready? It often begins in the quiet moments, those small, invisible pauses where you feel the weight of the room, the emotions of others, the need to smooth the edges of every situation. For Libra, this pattern of internalizing the chaos around you doesn't come from weakness. In fact, it stems from your profound ability to perceive the emotional landscape of others with razor-sharp clarity. You were born under a sign ruled by Venus, the planet of harmony, beauty, and relational equilibrium. And because of this, you've been gifted with an instinctive desire to make things feel right, not just for yourself, but for everyone. But here's the sacred truth that often goes unspoken. wanting peace is not the same as being responsible for maintaining it at all costs. You are not the glue meant to hold together everything and everyone. Just as a scale tips when overloaded on one side, so too do you when you bend endlessly to keep others stable. Somewhere along the way, many Libras began to believe that love must be earned through sacrifice, that being good means staying silent to avoid conflict, and that if they can just be kinder, softer, more accommodating, maybe then things will stay calm. Yet the reality is there are forces and outcomes in life that exist far beyond your ability to influence them. Relationships evolve, emotions shift, people make choices you cannot control, and pain still finds its way in even when you've done everything right. It's not your fault. It was never your fault. When you carry the emotional burdens of others, even silently, you disconnect from your center. You dim your voice to keep the peace, but all that silence eventually echoes inward, becoming guilt, resentment, or emotional fatigue. What many don't see is how often you absorb the discomfort of others to keep the atmosphere gentle. But self-sacrifice is not always noble when it leads to self-erasure. You can love deeply and still say no. You can be compassionate and still set boundaries. You can care without carrying. There is divine wisdom in allowing others to take responsibility for their own journey. Just as no one else can walk your path for you, you are not called to walk theirs. And as we grow, we begin to understand that choosing yourself is not abandonment. It's alignment. Even in sacred teachings, we are reminded of this balance, to love your neighbor as yourself, not more than yourself, not instead of yourself, but with equal reverence. And that includes you, Libra. You are worthy of the same gentleness, the same space, the same grace that you so freely offer others. Choosing peace within does not mean avoiding discomfort outside. Sometimes the most peaceful act is telling the truth first to yourself, and then to the world. In this phase of your journey, you are being invited to come home to your own center. To step out of the role of caretaker for everyone's emotions and instead nurture your own emotional truth. The scales of your life do not need to balance perfectly to be meaningful, they need to reflect your truth. When you stop overcorrecting for others, you begin to stabilize naturally from within. And from that place, Libra, you shine differently. Not with the strained glow of someone trying to keep everyone happy, but with the steady radiance of someone who is finally choosing to include themselves in the peace they long for. If any part of this speaks to your soul, I invite you to take a breath and leave a comment below saying, I allow balance to begin within me. Not just as a response, but as a declaration. Because today, Libra, your healing begins not by doing more, but by finally letting go. Sometimes we forget that our light is not something we built, it's something we were born with. For Libra, that light often looks like softness, elegance, and grace. You carry an inner beauty that doesn't shout but rather whispers into every space you enter. It's the way you listen with intention, the way you sense what others need before they speak, the way your presence seems to smooth out the edges of a chaotic moment. And yet, somewhere along your journey, you may have been made to feel that this light, this quiet brilliance of yours was too much for someone else to handle. So what did you do? You dimmed it. You tried to be smaller, gentler, more digestible. You became hyper-aware of how your energy made others feel, and you began to make yourself responsible for their comfort. But here's the gentle truth, Libra, it's not your job to manage how your light is received, it's your role to shine in the way only you can. The star card in the tarot often appears when healing is not just possible, but inevitable if you allow it. It represents hope, renewal, and divine authenticity. And that's what this part of your journey is calling for, not a reinvention, but a return. A return to the unfiltered version of yourself that existed before the world told you who you had to be to keep the peace. Your light was never a weapon. It was never a threat. And it certainly was never meant to be hidden out of guilt. There's something deeply human about the way we twist ourselves into shapes we were never meant to become, just to make others feel more at ease. Especially for Libra, whose cosmic blueprint is wired for balance and consideration. But being considerate of others should never come at the cost of betraying yourself. If you've ever apologized for speaking your truth, for standing in your beauty, for celebrating your gifts, understand this: that apology was never owed. Your light was never about being better than anyone. It was never about competition. It simply is. And when someone else feels intimidated by your brightness, that's their inner work to do, not your burden to carry. A wise reminder from spiritual wisdom teaches us to hide nothing that is good. Let it be seen. Let it serve. Let it uplift. When you shine authentically, you give others permission to do the same, not by dimming your flame but by standing firmly in it. Your kindness does not require your silence. Your compassion does not require invisibility. Your light does not require an apology. And so I ask you now, Libra, when was the last time you allowed yourself to be fully seen without editing who you are? When was the last time you celebrated your gifts without shrinking? Your essence is not a negotiation, it's a blessing. And the more you honor it, the more the world will reflect that truth back to you. If this resonates with you, if there's even a whisper inside that feels seen, I invite you to comment below and say, I reclaim my light. Let that be your declaration. Your starting point. A gentle revolution back to your center. Because you were never meant to apologize for being radiant. You were only ever meant to be. Change, when it finally arrives, often doesn't announce itself with grand trumpets or dramatic signs. Sometimes it comes softly through silence, through people who leave without closure, through dreams that feel like they slipped through your fingers. And yet, Libra, even in those quiet unravelings, something much greater has been at work. What you thought were missed opportunities, what felt like abandonment or delay, were never mistakes. They were precise alignments, delicate adjustments from the universe, gently steering you back to your own inner truth. Right now, you are standing at a threshold. And no matter how subtle it seems on the outside, energetically, this is a pivotal turning point. For many Libras, this moment marks a shift from over-accommodation to self-honoring, from emotional outsourcing to reclaiming your power. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world asked you to fragment yourself into pleasing pieces. Astrologically, the energy of your sun sign is being met with an invitation or realignment with purpose. If you were born between September 23rd and October 1st, this next phase may arrive in the form of a decision. But this time, the decision won't revolve around what's best for everyone else. It will be about choosing what aligns with your well-being, your peace, and your future. You're learning that choosing yourself is not selfish, it's sacred. For those of you born between October 2nd and October 12th, the changes may come in relationships. Perhaps an old dynamic will resurface, not to repeat itself, but to be reframed. When you finally draw a clear boundary not from anger, but from wisdom, you'll witness an energetic shift that affirms your self-worth. This isn't about pushing people away. It's about no longer abandoning yourself just to hold them close. And for Libras born between October 13th and October 22nd, your creativity and voice are being activated in powerful new ways. That project you've been dreaming of? That story you've been too hesitant to tell? The world is finally ready to receive it, and more importantly, you're finally ready to share it. The question is no longer, who am I to do this, but rather, who am I not to? In numerology, the number 6 reflects harmony and emotional restoration, while 11 signifies spiritual illumination and soul alignment. Both numbers are appearing for you now because you're being guided into a state of greater balance, but this time, it's internal. That balance is not about staying neutral. It's about staying honest. And when you stand in that kind of truth, the right people, paths, and possibilities flow toward you almost effortlessly. You may also feel more connected to certain colors during this time. Pale pink invites you into deeper self-love, softening the harshness of past self-judgments. Pastel blue supports your inner peace, encouraging calm decisions and grounded communication. And pearl white reminds you of your inherent worth, the purity of your intentions, the clarity of your soul. These colors aren't just visual, they carry energetic frequencies that can gently support your nervous system as you move through emotional recalibration. As everything around you begins to shift, you'll realize that the timing was never wrong. It was simply divine. Just like the seasons know when to change, your life knows when to unfold. You haven't missed your chance, you were simply being prepared to meet it fully. And if any part of you feels this in your body right now, I invite you to leave a comment and write, "I trust the timing of my life." Because you are not late. You are not lost. You are right on time for you. What if love was never something you had to earn in the first place? What if all those moments where you twisted yourself into someone easier to love, quieter, more accommodating, less needy, were actually moments where you drifted further from the very kind of connection your soul was always longing for? Libra, you've spent so much of your life believing that peace equals love, that if you're helpful, pleasant, or non-confrontational enough, people will stay. But true love doesn't arrive because you make everything easier. It arrives because you finally stop pretending and allow yourself to be fully seen. There's a particular vulnerability that lives in your chart. As an air sign ruled by Venus, you crave harmony, but harmony has often come at the cost of self-erasure. Somewhere along the way, you may have formed the belief that to be loved, you must be easy to handle. That being lovable means being agreeable. That your needs must be small and your feelings carefully edited. And while these coping patterns may have once protected you, they no longer serve your soul's evolution. In the tarot, the Lover's card in its purest sense isn't about romance. It's about alignment within yourself and with others. It's a mirror. And in order to reflect authentic love, you must first bring your full self to that mirror. Not the curated version of you who always keeps things calm, but the full, complex, emotional, honest you. Because real love can't flow where there's performance. It flows in truth. And truth sometimes comes with friction. It comes with boundaries. It comes with speaking up when you're afraid your voice might cost you something. But love, true love, doesn't walk away when you speak your truth. It leans in. It listens. It adjusts. And anything that leaves you when you're finally being real wasn't meant to stay. That is not rejection. That is redirection. This is where the law of attraction comes in, not just as a manifesting principle but as an energetic truth. When you stop chasing love by sacrificing who you are, you stop sending the universe the signal that your worth depends on someone else's comfort. Instead, you begin radiating a new frequency, one rooted in self-acceptance. That frequency doesn't beg for affection, it draws in the kind of relationships that already understand how to hold it. You begin attracting what reflects your truth, not your survival pattern. And that's when something beautiful happens. You stop wondering whether you're lovable and begin experiencing the peace of simply being loved. Not for what you do. Not for how well you manage conflict. Not for how pleasant you make everything. But for who you are when you let your guard down. For who you are when you stop trying to be perfect. For who you are when you remember that the first relationship that must be healed is the one you have with yourself. There's quiet wisdom in remembering what sacred teachings have always hinted at. Love, when pure, does not demand performance. It invites presence. And Libra, you are being called to be present with yourself now more than ever. To stop reaching for love and start allowing it to reach you. If this message resonates with your heart in any way, I invite you to pause and comment below with the words, "I am enough as I am." Because the moment you stop trying to be lovable is the exact moment you begin to receive love that is real. Sometimes clarity doesn't come through a dramatic revelation but through small, consistent acts of self-honoring. When you've done the emotional work acknowledging your worth, detaching from guilt, and embracing your light, the next step is integration. And integration, Libra, is where transformation becomes real. This is where we shift from knowing to living. From insight to action. And that begins with tending to the areas of your life where your energy has either been leaking or waiting to be awakened. Let's begin with your body, the sacred vessel that has carried you through every emotional season. Stress, when left unacknowledged, builds quietly in the nervous system, especially in someone as energetically sensitive as you. You don't just carry your own emotions, you absorb the emotional weather around you. That's why even 5 minutes of mindfulness in the morning can be revolutionary. Not because it solves every problem, but because it gives your inner system a moment to pause, exhale, and remember that you are safe within yourself. Avoid overstimulation both in what you consume and in how you start your day. Limit excess caffeine, which can mimic the physiological symptoms of anxiety. Instead, nourish yourself with foods that feel alive: green fruits, grounding vegetables, and anything that supports calm rather than chaos. Healing doesn't require extremes. It only asks for consistency and kindness. When it comes to your purpose, ask yourself the kind of question that bypasses the ego and speaks directly to the soul. Is what I'm doing giving me life, or is it just keeping me busy? You are not here to merely fill your days. You are here to fill them with meaning. And if something feels misaligned even subtly, this is your permission to pause and reconsider. You don't need a 5-year plan. You only need the courage to listen to the small yes or no inside of you, and to follow it one honest choice at a time. Financially, you may have grown up believing that generosity equals worth. That you must spend, give, or overextend to prove you're good, supportive, or loving. But that narrative has expired. You don't need to spend money to maintain emotional peace or avoid tension. Peace doesn't come from proving anything. True financial healing starts when you begin to treat your energy like currency, choosing to invest in what replenishes you rather than what temporarily fills a void. Be intentional about where your money goes, just as you've begun to be intentional about where your attention flows. And in love, the heart of Libra's chart, everything begins with the relationship you hold with yourself. You cannot create sustainable intimacy with others if the way you speak to yourself is conditional. It's time to stop waiting for external validation and begin practicing the kind of love that does not need to be earned. Self-love isn't an Instagram quote, it's found in the everyday choices to protect your peace, speak your boundaries, and release the need to explain yourself. Saying no doesn't make you unkind. It makes you honest. And that honesty, delivered with softness, is your most magnetic power. There's an old, gentle wisdom that says we are called to be stewards of the life we've been given, not to control it, but to care for it with reverence. You are not here to run from your needs. You're here to recognize them as sacred. So if this moment is nudging you toward a softer, stronger version of yourself, let it. And if that resonates, comment below with the words, "I choose myself with love." Because every step you take from this point forward is no longer about survival, it's about alignment. And so, Libra, if you've made it to this moment, I want you to pause and feel what's shifted inside you. Maybe it's subtly small exhale, a loosening in your chest, the soft recognition that something you've believed for too long no longer fits who you're becoming. You are not here to be the fragile scale that trembles under the weight of everyone else's needs. You are here to become the center of your own compass, the still point from which everything else finds its rhythm. And when you begin to stand in that quiet power, something extraordinary happens. The world adjusts to you, not the other way around. What would it feel like to stop apologizing for your light? To stop asking permission to simply be as you are? The truth is, no one has the right to diminish you, and no one ever did. That old story, the one that told you love must be earned, that peace is only kept through self-sacrifice, that balance means silence, that story is over. A new narrative is waiting to be written, and you, Libra, are the author. But the pen is only yours if you choose to hold it. And that choice begins now. Will you keep contorting yourself to fit into spaces that no longer match your vibration, or will you take the first small, courageous step into your own truth? Will you continue to overextend, hoping to be chosen? Or will you remember that you were never meant to chase love, you were born to radiate it? You don't need permission to begin again. You don't need to explain your boundaries to be worthy of keeping them. And you certainly don't need to hide the brightest parts of yourself just because they make others uncomfortable. Let this be the moment where you say yes to the version of yourself that no longer needs to be edited, softened, or made more convenient. Let this be your turning point. And I want to invite you to reflect for just a moment. What would change in your life if you fully trusted that your light was never a problem, but the beginning of your purpose? Who might you become if you stopped negotiating your truth for temporary approval? What kind of peace would be possible if you decided, right here and now, that you belong to yourself first? If this resonates with something deep inside you, if even a small part of you is ready to walk differently, speak more honestly, or breathe more freely, I invite you to share it in the comments. Write, "I claim my truth," and know that by doing so, you're not only affirming your own journey but helping another Libra out there feel seen. That's the beauty of this space-off Zodiac Whisper territory. Rise together, through truth, through tenderness, through shared transformation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening not just with your mind, but with your heart. Every like, every comment, every subscription helps us bring these messages to more souls who need them. Your support isn't just digital, it's energetic. It moves this work forward. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Zodiac Whisper Tarot, tap the notification bell so you never miss a message meant for you, and take one small action today that reflects the truth you're stepping into. You don't have to wait for permission to be free. You just have to remember that you already are.